In July 2023, the Federal Reserve launched something called FedNow. If you blinked, you missed it. Most news outlets barely mentioned it. And when they did, the coverage was technical, dry, and frankly, boring. But in the months since, something interesting happened. FedNow started appearing in conversations about government surveillance, financial control, and what some people call the digital dollar. You might have seen headlines warning that this was the infrastructure for a central bank digital currency, that every transaction would be tracked, that your money could be frozen instantly. Here's the thing. Most of that is wrong, but not all of it. And understanding the difference matters because while FedNow itself is about as threatening as a faster plumbing system, the broader conversation about digital currencies is one of the most important financial debates of our lifetime. It is a debate that could determine whether you have financial privacy 20 years from now, or whether every purchase you make is monitored, categorized, and potentially controlled. So let us start with what FedNow actually is. No conspiracy theories, no speculation, just the technical reality. FedNow is an instant payment settlement system. Think of it as the infrastructure that lets banks transfer money between each other in real time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Before FedNow, when you sent money from your Bank of America account to someone's Chase account, that transaction went through what is called the Automated Clearinghouse System, the ACH. And the ACH only processes transactions in batches, usually overnight, and not on weekends or holidays. This is why, even in 2023, it could take 2 or 3 days for a direct deposit to show up in your account. The money was not actually moving slowly. Your employer sent it immediately. But the settlement system, the behind-the-scenes infrastructure that actually moves funds between banks, only operated during business hours. FedNow changes that. Now, settlement happens instantly. You send money, it arrives in seconds. The recipient's bank has the funds immediately. No waiting, no batch processing, no weekends off. Now, if you are thinking, wait, I can already send money instantly with Venmo or Zelle, you are absolutely right. But here's the technical distinction. Those services either front the money themselves and settle later, or they operate within a single bank's ecosystem. FedNow is the actual settlement layer. It is the infrastructure underneath. And here is the crucial point. This technology is not new. The United Kingdom has had their faster payment service since 2008. Europe has had instant SEPA payments since 2017. India launched their Unified Payments Interface in 2016, and it now processes billions of transactions monthly. Singapore, Australia, Japan, dozens of countries already operate real-time payment systems. The United States was actually late to this party. So why did the Federal Reserve build FedNow? 2 main reasons. First, the existing private instant payment systems, things like the clearinghouse's RTP network, did not include all banks. Smaller community banks and credit unions often could not access them. FedNow creates a level playing field. Every bank that holds reserves at the Federal Reserve can use it, which is basically every bank in America. Second, correspondent banking costs. When small banks need to move money, they often go through larger correspondent banks that charge fees for the service. FedNow reduces this dependency. It is a cost-saving measure, particularly for smaller institutions. That is it. That is what FedNow does. It is a faster payment rail, like upgrading from dial-up internet to broadband. The infrastructure changed, but the actual internet, the websites, the content, the experience stayed the same. Your money is still dollars. The Federal Reserve did not create a new currency. Your bank still operates the same way. The government did not gain new surveillance capabilities. Every regulatory requirement that existed before FedNow, the Bank Secrecy Act, anti-money laundering rules, know your customer requirements, all of those still apply exactly as they did. FedNow made payments faster, period. So why all the confusion? Why did this relatively mundane infrastructure upgrade get tangled up with fears about government surveillance and financial control? Because at the exact same time FedNow was being developed, the Federal Reserve was also researching something completely different: central bank digital currencies, CBDCs. And a lot of people conflated these two things. They saw Federal Reserve and digital and assumed they were the same project. They are not. And understanding the difference is critical because while FedNow is already operational and relatively harmless, the CBDC question is still open. The design choices have not been made yet. The privacy protections have not been determined. The control mechanisms have not been decided. That is the story that actually matters, not FedNow, the digital dollar debate. So let us talk about what central bank digital currencies actually are, why governments around the world are developing them, and why the design choices being made right now could determine your financial freedom for decades to come. In January 2022, the Federal Reserve published a research paper titled Money and Payments: The U.S. Dollar in the Age of Digital Transformation. It is 70 pages of dense technical analysis, the kind of document that puts most people to sleep by page 3. But buried in that document was a question that should concern every American. Should the United States create a central bank digital currency? Now, before we go any further, we need to define terms, because digital currency can mean a lot of different things, and the distinctions matter enormously. When most people hear digital currency, they think of cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, Ethereum, decentralized systems that operate outside government control. That is not what we are talking about here. A central bank digital currency is digital money issued directly by a central bank. In America's case, the Federal Reserve. It is the digital equivalent of the cash in your wallet, except instead of paper bills, it exists as electronic entries. But here's where it gets complicated. There are multiple ways to design a CBDC, and those design choices determine everything. The first big question, retail or wholesale? A wholesale CBDC would only be used by banks and financial institutions for settling large transactions between themselves. It would be invisible to ordinary Americans. You would never touch it, never see it, never interact with it. It would just be back-end infrastructure, like FedNow, but with different technical architecture. A retail CBDC is different. That is digital currency that you and I would actually use. Money in a digital wallet on your phone. Direct accounts with the Federal Reserve instead of with private banks. That is where the privacy questions emerge. The second big question, account-based or token-based? Account-based systems work like your current bank account. Every dollar is tied to your identity. The central bank knows exactly who holds every unit of currency. Transactions are recorded with names attached. There is a complete ledger of who sent what to whom. Token-based systems work more like physical cash. The currency itself carries value, but it is not necessarily tied to your identity. You could have offline capability, the ability to transfer digital currency, without an internet connection, without the transaction being recorded in a central database. Think about the difference. When you hand someone a $20 bill, there's no record of that transaction. The Federal Reserve does not know you gave cash to your neighbor. The bill just changed hands. A token-based CBDC could work the same way. But an account-based CBDC would record everything. Every purchase, every transfer, every financial interaction. Here is why this matters to you personally. If the Federal Reserve chooses an account-based retail CBDC, they would know that on Tuesday at 3:47 p.m., you spent $47.32 at a liquor store. Not just that someone bought alcohol, that you did. They would know you donated to a political campaign. They would know you paid for a therapist. They would know you sent money to your adult child who is struggling financially. They would know everything. But if they choose a token-based system with offline capability, those transactions could remain private. Your grocery purchases, your medical expenses, your charitable donations, all conducted without creating a permanent government record. This is not a technical debate between engineers. It is a choice between two completely different futures for American financial privacy. And this is the design choice that matters. This is where privacy either survives or dies. The Federal Reserve's research paper did not commit to either approach. It laid out options. It asked for public comment. And that comment period closed in May 2022. More than 2,000 responses came in. Privacy was the dominant concern. But here's what we do not know. What happens next? The Federal Reserve has not announced a decision. There is no legislation mandating a CBDC. There is no executive order requiring one. The United States, unlike many other countries, has not actually committed to creating a digital dollar. We are still in the research phase. But research is advancing quickly. The Federal Reserve Bank of Boston partnered with MIT to develop technical prototypes. They are called Project Hamilton. The goal was to test whether a CBDC could handle the transaction volume of a country like the United States, hundreds of thousands of transactions per second during peak times. The results, published in early 2022, showed it was technically feasible. The prototype processed over 1.6 million transactions per second in testing, so the technology works. The question is whether it should be deployed, and if so, how. Now, the Federal Reserve has been careful to emphasize that exploring CBDC technology does not mean they are going to issue one. Chairman Jerome Powell has stated repeatedly that the Fed would only proceed with explicit authorization from Congress. This is not something the central bank can just roll out unilaterally, and there is significant political opposition. Republican lawmakers have introduced bills to prohibit the Federal Reserve from issuing retail CBDCs without congressional approval. They cite privacy concerns, the potential for government overreach, and the risk of disintermediating private banks. Democratic lawmakers have been more mixed. Some see potential benefits: financial inclusion for people who cannot access traditional banking, faster government benefit distribution, reduced costs for cross-border transactions. Others share the privacy concerns, so we are in a holding pattern. The technology exists, the The research is ongoing, the political debate is active, but no decisions have been made. That is the actual state of affairs in the United States. But while America debates, the rest of the world is moving forward, and what is happening internationally gives us a preview of what different CBDC designs actually look like in practice. Some of those experiments should concern us deeply. Others offer hope that privacy-preserving designs are possible. Let us look at both. As of January 2025, according to the Atlantic Council's CBDC tracker, 130 countries representing 98% of global GDP are exploring central bank digital currencies. 11 countries have fully launched them. Another 21 are in pilot programs. This is not a fringe experiment. This is the future of money being built in real time across the globe, and the results are instructive. Let us start with China, because their digital yuan, officially called the Digital Currency Electronic Payment System, or DCEP, is the most advanced, most widely deployed, and most concerning CBDC in operation. China began developing the digital yuan in 2014. They launched pilots in 2020. By 2023, over 260 million people had opened digital yuan wallets. Transactions exceeded hundreds of billions of dollars. And here is what we know about how it works. The digital yuan is programmable. That means the central bank can attach conditions to the currency itself. They have tested digital yuan that expires if not spent by a certain date, literally money that disappears if you do not use it fast enough. This is designed to stimulate consumption, to prevent people from saving during economic slowdowns. They have tested geographic restrictions, digital yuan that can only be spent in certain cities or regions, currency that is locked to specific types of purchases. And most significantly, every transaction is visible to the People's Bank of China. There is no privacy. The central bank can see who is spending money, where they are spending it, what they are buying, and who they are paying. Now, China is quick to point out that commercial banks and payment providers cannot see this data. Only the central bank can. They frame this as a privacy protection. You are hidden from corporations, just not from the government. But here is where it connects to China's social control systems. In 2022, multiple reports emerged from Chinese citizens describing a disturbing pattern. Individuals who had posted criticism of local government policies on social media found their digital payment options suddenly restricted. Not completely frozen, they could still buy groceries and pay utilities, but ride-sharing apps would not accept their payment. High-speed train tickets to other provinces failed to process. Hotel bookings were declined. Their money worked, but only for approved activities within approved geographic boundaries. No arrests were made. No judges issued orders. No formal charges were filed. The restrictions were simply implemented through the payment infrastructure itself. And because every transaction flows through systems visible to the authorities, identifying and restricting critics became trivially easy. This is programmable money used as a control mechanism. And it is not theoretical, it is operational. Now, defenders of CBDCs will say, but China is an authoritarian state. They already control their citizens. The digital yuan just uses new technology for existing repression. A democratic country would never implement it this way. Maybe. Let us test that theory by looking at other implementations. The Bahamas launched the Sand Dollar in October 2020, the first full CBDC deployment in the world. It is a small island nation, population 400,000, so the scale is nothing like China. But the design choices matter. The Sand Dollar is account-based, meaning there is identity verification required. But it includes privacy tiers. Small transactions, under certain thresholds, do not require full identification. You can have a limited wallet with basic information. Only larger transactions trigger enhanced verification. It is not perfect privacy, but it is a meaningful distinction from China's approach. The Bahamian central bank designed in privacy protections from the start. Adoption has been slow. Most Bahamians still prefer traditional banking or cash. But the system exists, and it is not turned into a surveillance state. Europe is developing a digital euro, and their proposal includes interesting privacy features. The European Central Bank has stated explicitly that offline transactions, payments made without internet connectivity, would not be recorded in a central database. They would work like handing someone cash. The sender and receiver would know, but the central bank would not. This is technically feasible. It requires specific design choices, but it is possible. The European proposal also includes limits on how much data the central bank itself would see. Commercial transactions might only be visible to anti-money laundering authorities if they exceed certain thresholds, similar to current cash reporting requirements. Again, not perfect privacy, but evidence that surveillance is not inevitable. Nigeria launched the Naira in October 2021. Population 200 million, enormous potential user base, and by most measures, it has been a failure. As of late 2023, less than 0.5% of Nigerians had adopted it. Why? Because Nigerians do not trust their central bank. They have experienced decades of currency devaluation, capital controls, and financial repression. When the government offered them digital currency with full surveillance capability, they simply refused to use it. This is an important lesson. CBDCs only work if people voluntarily adopt them. You cannot force a population to use digital currency if they have alternatives. Cash still exists, cryptocurrency exists, barter exists. People will route around systems they do not trust. Which brings us to a crucial point about financial control. It is not enough for the infrastructure to exist. The government also has to eliminate alternatives. This is why whenever you see CBDC proposals, you should also watch for proposals to restrict cash. The two go hand in hand. A surveillance-enabled digital currency does not give government control if people can still transact in untraceable physical cash. India provides a case study. In 2016, Prime Minister Modi announced the overnight demonetization of 501,000 rupee notes, 86% of currency in circulation. The stated goal was fighting corruption and tax evasion. The practical effect was chaos, economic disruption, and a forced push toward digital payments. India now has one of the most successful digital payment systems in the world. The Unified Payments Interface processes billions of transactions monthly, and they are developing a digital rupee. The pattern is clear: reduce cash, expand digital payments, introduce CBDC. Europe has proposed limits on cash transactions above certain amounts. Some European countries already restrict large cash purchases. The stated justification is always the same: fighting money laundering, tax evasion, terrorism financing. The effect is the same: pushing populations toward traceable digital transactions. Now, let me be clear. Money laundering, tax evasion, and terrorism financing are real problems. Governments have legitimate interests in monitoring large transactions. The question is where you draw the line between reasonable oversight and invasive surveillance. And that is where we need to talk about the infrastructure that already exists. Here is an uncomfortable truth. If you are worried about government surveillance of your finances, you are about 20 years too late. The infrastructure already exists. It has been operating for decades, and it monitors almost everything you do. Let me walk you through what your bank already reports to the federal government. The Bank Secrecy Act, passed in 1970, requires financial institutions to report cash transactions over $10,000. That is the Currency Transaction Report, the CTR. Your bank files one every time you deposit or withdraw that much cash. The government gets a copy. They know you did it. But it is not just large transactions. Banks are also required to file Suspicious Activity Reports, SARs, whenever they see patterns that might indicate money laundering, structuring to avoid reporting requirements, or other financial crimes. And here's the thing. The threshold for suspicious is incredibly broad. Banks file millions of SARs every year. You would not know if your bank filed one about you. They are legally prohibited from telling you. The report goes to FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and it sits in a database that law enforcement can query. Then there is the Patriot Act, passed after September 11, 2001. Section 314 allows law enforcement to request information about specific individuals from every financial institution in the country. Banks are required to search their records and report any matches. Your bank also participates in something called Know Your Customer requirements. They verify your identity when you open an account. They monitor your transactions for unusual patterns. They file reports if anything seems off. All of this happens right now, today. With the traditional banking system, when you use your debit card, your bank sees exactly what you bought, where you bought it, and when. When you transfer money to someone, the bank records who received it. When you take out a loan, when you pay your mortgage, when you deposit your paycheck, all of it is recorded, monitored, and potentially reportable to federal authorities. The idea that we currently have financial privacy is largely a myth. So when people warn that CBDCs would enable surveillance, the honest answer is, compared to what? The surveillance infrastructure already exists, but here is what changed in the last 5 years. And this is the part most financial analysts miss. The infrastructure did not just get bigger, it got smarter. Artificial intelligence can now analyze transaction patterns in real time. The Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network deployed machine learning systems that identify suspicious behavior faster than any human analyst ever could. They can spot patterns across millions of accounts simultaneously. They can predict potential violations before they happen. What took investigators weeks to uncover 10 years ago now gets flagged in minutes. And here is the crucial shift. The old surveillance system was reactive. Someone had to do something wrong, get reported, and then investigators would examine their financial history. The new system is predictive. It identifies people who fit suspicious patterns before any crime is committed, which means the surveillance you are already under just became exponentially more powerful. And we are about to hand that system a tool that makes freezing accounts instantaneous. Now you might say, but at least this is just transaction monitoring. The government cannot actually freeze my account without due process. And that is mostly true. Mostly. In February 2022, during the trucker convoy protests in Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act. And under that authority, the Canadian government instructed banks to freeze accounts associated with the protest. No court orders, no criminal charges, just administrative action based on suspected participation in an unlawful assembly. Dozens of accounts were frozen. The government later admitted some were frozen in error. People who just donated $20 to the convoy suddenly could not access their money. Now, Canada is not the United States. We have different laws, different constitutional protections. The Emergencies Act is a Canadian law that does not apply here. But the precedent is instructive. When governments face protests they consider threats to public order, they will use whatever financial tools they have available. And here's the key point. Canada did this with the existing banking system. They did not need a CBDC. They did not need FedNow. They used the traditional infrastructure that was already in place. The freezing power already existed. So what would a CBDC change? Primarily speed and precision. Right now, if the federal government wants to freeze someone's bank account, they need to go through legal processes. They get a warrant, or invoke civil forfeiture laws, or use Treasury Department authority. Banks then implement the freeze. It is not instantaneous, but it is not slow either, usually within hours. A CBDC could make it instant, and depending on the design, it could be more targeted, not just freezing an entire account, but preventing specific types of transactions. You could still buy groceries, but not firearms. You could pay your rent, but not donate to political causes. Programmable money enables programmable restrictions. This is the nightmare scenario critics worry about, and it is technically feasible. But here's the thing, it requires political will to implement. It requires laws to authorize. It requires Americans to accept it. And that brings us to the most important question. What can you actually do about this? Let us be practical. If you are concerned about financial surveillance, about potential government overreach, about the possibility that CBDCs could be designed in ways that threaten privacy, you have options. Not perfect options, not options that make you invisible, but meaningful ways to preserve some financial autonomy. First, understand the role of physical cash. Cash is the last truly private transaction medium. When you hand someone a $20 bill, there is no record. No bank sees it, no government database logs it. It is person to person, immediate, and anonymous. The problem is that cash usage is declining. In 2015, 33% of transactions in the United States were cash. By 2022, it was down to 18%. The trend is clear. Some of this is convenience. Digital payments are simply easier, but some of it is deliberate policy. Banks do not want to handle cash. It is expensive to transport, store, and secure. Merchants do not want cash registers. Digital payments integrate with inventory systems. So even without government mandates, cash is slowly being phased out by market forces. If you want to preserve cash as an option, use it regularly. Businesses keep accepting cash as long as customers demand it. The moment cash transactions drop below a certain threshold, merchants start refusing it. We have already seen this with some retailers. Keep cash in your possession. Not life savings, that is not practical or safe, but enough to handle expenses for a week or two if digital systems went down. This is not paranoia. It is resilience. We have seen bank failures, system outages, cyber attacks. Cash works when the grid does not. Second, consider physical precious metals. Gold and silver have served as money for thousands of years. They cannot be frozen, canceled, or programmed. They have no counterparty risk. You own them outright, not as a claim on someone else. The drawbacks are obvious. Storage, security, liquidity. You cannot pay your electric bill in gold coins. But as a store of value outside the digital financial system, precious metals have a track record no other asset can match. If you go this route, focus on recognized forms. American gold eagles, Canadian maple leafs, junk silver coins. These are easily verified and widely traded. Avoid rare coins, collectibles, or exotic forms that depend on premium valuations. And understand the reporting requirements. Dealers must file reports on certain large purchases. If you buy more than $10,000 in gold, expect a Form 8300 to be filed with the IRS. This does not make it illegal. It is just reportable. Third, let us talk about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. This is where things get complicated because the cryptocurrency world is split between surveillance-resistant systems and highly traceable ones. Bitcoin, despite popular belief, is not anonymous. It is pseudonymous. Every transaction is recorded on a public blockchain. If anyone connects your real identity to a Bitcoin address, through an exchange account, an IP address, a purchase, they can trace every transaction you have ever made. Privacy coins like Monero use cryptographic techniques to obscure transaction details. They are designed for privacy from the ground up, but they are also increasingly restricted by exchanges and face regulatory pressure. If you are looking at cryptocurrency as a hedge against financial surveillance, understand what you are getting into. It is a rapidly evolving space. Regulations change, technology advances, what works today might not work tomorrow. And practically speaking, you still need to convert cryptocurrency back to dollars to pay most expenses. That conversion point is where surveillance happens. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, stay informed and engaged. The CBDC debate is ongoing. The Federal Reserve has not made final decisions. Congress has not passed legislation. The design choices that will determine privacy, surveillance, and control have not been locked in yet. That means public input still matters. When the Federal Reserve asked for comments in 2022, thousands of Americans responded. Privacy concerns dominated. That feedback influences policy. If your congressional representatives introduce legislation about CBDCs, either authorizing them or restricting them, you can weigh in. You can vote accordingly. This is not decided yet. The outcome is not predetermined. And here is what is crucial to understand. The technology itself is neutral. A CBDC could be designed with strong privacy protections, offline capability, and limited government visibility. Or it could be designed as a surveillance system with programmable controls. Those are political choices, not technical necessities. The European Central Bank's proposal proves that privacy-preserving designs are possible. The Bahamas' tiered approach shows you can balance financial oversight with personal privacy. Even the Federal Reserve's research acknowledged that privacy is a design goal. So the question is not whether digital currencies are inherently evil. The question is, who makes the design decisions? What priorities guide them? And do citizens have a voice in the outcome? Which brings me to my final point, diversification. You do not have to choose one approach. You can hold some cash, some precious metals, some cryptocurrency, and yes, some traditional bank deposits. Diversification is not just about asset allocation. It is about maintaining options. If one system fails, if one payment method becomes restricted, if one store of value is compromised, you have alternatives. This is not about paranoia. It is about resilience in an uncertain world. We are living through a transformation in how money works. The systems that have operated for decades are being redesigned for a digital age. That redesign will determine financial privacy, individual autonomy, and the relationship between citizens and state for generations. It is happening now. The decisions are being made. The infrastructure is being built. FedNow was not the threat people thought it was. It is just a payment rail, faster plumbing. But the CBDC question is real. The international experiments are instructive. The surveillance infrastructure already exists. And the choices made in the next few years will matter enormously. So pay attention, stay informed, understand the technical distinctions, separate the real concerns from the conspiracy theories, and remember, the future is not written yet. We still have a say in how this turns out. The question is whether we are paying attention.